Thank you, Agnieszka, and that's very nice. And I find that I'm among professors, and I think Ambassador Gorge is the only one who has been a practitioner with me. So what I will do is I will speak generally on soft power and public diplomacy, because there are many issues in soft power and public diplomacy which we tend not to discuss most of the times. Instead of going to specific topics, I will talk generally. Though normally I don't like the word soft power. I mean, it's something which I feel very uncomfortable with. I use it since Joseph Nye coined the word in the 1990s. This has been a most overused word and everybody uses it, so I use it, but I'm not really comfortable with it because it's got power connotations. And I believe soft power is more about influence, because Joseph Nye said that it is the ability to influence behavior of others to get what you want. But for me, it is more about influence than about power. So, but still everybody is using soft power, so we shall use it. And Nye talked about liberal democratic policies and free market economy. But today, the range of topics on which soft power is there has increased a lot. It's not just democracy, free press, elections, economic strength, but also heritage and culture, religion, performing arts like dance, music, theater, movies, cinema, scientific power, IT, space, atomic energy, cuisine, handicrafts, textiles, you name it. And now in the pandemic time, people talk about health systems, pharma, vaccines. The country's leaders make a difference of how soft power is seen. So it has become a much wider construct. But these are all only soft power assets. They are not soft power. You have to translate the assets into what you call soft power. And it's not easy because power, when we talk about power, is an external source. When we talk about soft power, it is something which is more influence rather than power. And influence comes from within. It has to be internalized and believed in. The person who is influenced has to believe in what he is being influenced about. It cannot be imposed from outside. Like, for example, believe in the fact that US education is one of the best education in the world. That's a belief. It is not imposed by the Americans or anybody. There is a belief because you see the system where it is. Or the belief that yoga is a great system of health and exercise. It has benefits. It's a belief that you have. So these are things which soft power means internalizing the influence. And when it comes to between countries, international relation between countries, it's about perception. How does one country perceive the other? Not only the leadership, but also the people and the institutions. So if you have a positive perception, whatever the country does, you tend to see it in a positive light. Always the glass is half full. You tend to forgive anything that they say or do. And if you see a country in a negative light, you see it glass is half empty. All the action you see with suspicion as to whether the action is being taken for its own purpose or is there a other purpose behind it. Of course, there are countries with relations in which there is no perception at all and you only go by actions and interest. For example, a relation between Nepal and Bolivia. I don't think so they have any perception of what Bolivia is or Bolivia has any perception of what Nepal is. So they go only by actions and whatever they create among themselves. But for many of the countries, the perception comes from many factors. I mean, we told you all the factors from democracy to heritage to cuisine to everything. But the two most important factors are trust and credibility. These are most important because do I trust the country and its actions? Or are all these soft power assets of that country credible? If a country consistently says one thing and does something else, then its credibility is low. If it regularly breaks internationally accepted norms and rules, then there is very little trust in that country. How do you trust that country? Professor Nye had said in 2012, if you remember, he said in the 21st century, credibility will be the scarcest resource. How do you bring credibility? And this is where public diplomacy comes in. How do a public diplomacy system of a country portray trust and credibility of that country? People see public diplomacy as spin doctors, people who embellish reality, who put a spin on things. But that's not true because in today's tech-driven world, of course, in today's tech-driven world, it is easy for a country with a lot of resources to embellish reality, to put a spin on things. And you can do it. I mean, if you remember Goebbels, if he said, if you tell a big lie and keep repeating it enough, people will eventually come to believe in it. So if you have enough resources that you can keep on telling a lie. So There are countries with a lot of resources which can spread the word around. But today's world, tech-driven world, is more transparent and where there's an information overload. There is information everywhere. Very difficult to hide the truth. In fact, in today's world, there are many versions of the truth. You can have many versions of the truth. So public diplomacy becomes one of narrative, of a credible narrative based on facts. How does the public diplomacy system create a narrative which is credible and based on fact? And we again come back to the question of credibility and trust. And if you look among the younger generations, I mean, we are all older, probably Agnieszka is one of the youngest among us, but when you look at the younger generation, there is very little trust and credibility in government and this trust and in government institutions. So what does public diplomacy does? Is it about propaganda? Because again, Nai had said, the best propaganda is not propaganda. Because soft power is a fragile thing. It takes years to build an image, but it takes only one incident, one wrong move, one falsehood, one negative thing to break that image. So you need to be consistent and normative, no hypocrisy. You have to walk the talk. What you preach is what you do. And this has happened to many countries. They say something, they preach values, but they don't practice it themselves. So your soft power assets actually go down because you don't preach what you talk. And the main problem with soft power, with people who think they have soft power, is hubris, pride. And that is the problem which has happened consistently. I mean, you look at democracy, for instance. When Joseph Nye said liberal democracy is the most important aspect, if you have it, it's the greatest soft power you have. It was a great soft power till you decided that you will now forcibly democratize other people, other countries. So you used the hard power to enforce soft power. So you went into Iraq where you said, okay, we will now make you democratic country. So, so then soft power loses its appeal. And the same thing, the Chinese did the same thing to the West. They used the hubris of the West. The West thought that if we bring China into the fold, we integrate China into the system, China would become democratic like us and there will be free market in China and we will all live happily ever after. But China used that same thing. They used the hubris of the West. They took in their capitalism, but they never let the market become dominant. They never let government system. The state was always dominant. They actually used capitalism to strengthen one-party system in their country. So in a sense, hubris has been the weakness. And then China itself had the hubris because after it became strong enough, it thought it could export its own variety of power, soft power, the Beijing consensus against the Washington consensus. So this is something you have to watch out for because this is something which will keep on happening always. So public diplomacy becomes a balance between influence and hubris. How do you balance? So it's a balance. You have to keep a proper balance between projection and propaganda. How do you project a country and what is propaganda? Because today's world, the moment you start doing something, it's seen as propaganda, people stop believing in it. And that is very important because that to that end comes the fact that you have to create a narrative that is again credible, trustworthy, and based on facts. That is very important for public diplomacy. And you have to show the country as playing an important role in the global arena. A country that is an asset to the world, respecting international norms and helping in setting global agenda and policy. You have to look at that because there are many issues which we have to solve together. There are global issues which we cannot tackle individually. Issues like climate change, terrorism and extremism, poverty and hunger, inequality in the world. All these can be addressed if countries get together. And if you are seen as helping in doing this, then the credibility and trust of your country is great. Then your soft power is actually a power, and that your public diplomacy is able to project it in a manner in which people trust you and believe that this country has the influence to be able to play a major role in the world. And that is where I will end. If you have questions, we will take it. If you want to talk about India specifically, we can talk later on. But I just wanted to set the trend for what we are going to discuss. Thank you very much, Agnieszka.